Had you heard? Matthew Golden, the first receiver taken by the Green Bay Packers in the first round since 2002. We kick off our annual rookie orientation series with a closer look at the Packers' newest receiver.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Chancellor Johnson, back on the show. We had him on to talk about the Houston Texans when they played the Green Bay Packers last year. He is a former Green Bay sports reporter, now in Houston, and he did a terrific interview with Matthew Golden. They watched tape. They broke down Golden's film together. It gave a lot of insight on Matthew Golden's personality, the way that he sees the game, the way that he views route running. And so we'll get some awesome insight from Chancellor Johnson on the first of our rookie orientation series. For those of you who have not been with us before, our rookie orientation series is an entire episode just devoted to getting to know a player. We've had coaches on, we've had players on before, so that fans, you guys, can get a better understanding of what this player brings to the Green Bay Packers. In case you missed it when we did this on our live reaction show, let's just talk about, before we get to Chance, my perspective on Matthew Golden, 5'11", 191. This is one of those funny things. If you like the player, you'll write still only 21. And if you don't like the player as much, you'll write will turn 22 as the season opens, which is what I wrote. Was not a highly productive player, 35th percentile dominator, which is a thing that I care about, target share, touchdown percentage, those sorts of things. How much did they dominate their team's offense? Now, the Texas receivers, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Steve Sarkisian, has not had guys who have taken a bunch of target share over the last couple of years. Xavier Worthy has turned into a really productive player in Kansas City. A.D. Mitchell is wildly talented, but does not have a quarterback that can hit the broadside of a barn with a beach ball. So that's problematic for him. 61st percentile breakout age. So if you go back and you look at the last decade of receivers, anybody who's had a 1,000-yard season has been over the 50 percentile mark in either dominator or breakout age. So the fact that he has that is a good sign. He has short arms, 21st percentile arm length, and just really one season of high-level productivity. Never had more than 60 catches in his collegiate career. Houston transfer. We get into that a little bit more because there's a lot of good perspective we can get here with Chancellor coming up. He can make a catch and accelerate. Something I really liked about him. When he can make a catch on the run, it's pluck and go. Was a 75th percentile or thereabouts receiver grade by Pro Football Focus. 50 percentile versus man coverage, but did not see very much man coverage at all. So are you worried about it? Well, it wasn't something that he saw a ton of because these Texas receivers will just run by you. A lot of teams were frankly scared to play them in man coverage. He can make catches in muddy situations. It's something you really, really like about him. For a smaller player, he can make those adversity plays because he's a natural hands catcher, can make plays away from his body, coming back to the ball, adjusting. He's got really good body control, which is one of those things that every Packers receiver has. The only place you really see the high-end speed on tape, at Texas anyway, is in the open field on kick returns. I have gone back and watched some of the Houston stuff, and I think this is Quinn Ewers related. When he comes out of his break on, let's say, a post, he is not hauling ass accelerating out of it. At Houston, he is, or at least more. And so you see, I think some accommodating the quarterback, let's say. He can make a catch and take a shot, which is another thing you love. In breaker, ball in, bang. He can hold on to those. So for a smaller player, that's a really nice plus. Adversity plays at his size are a plus. He's not someone who's going to make you miss in space, does not have wiggle in space. I watched 10 games before I saw him really make someone miss in space. Now it was Maxwell Hairston, who's a first round pick, and then he scored, but Maxwell Hairston is a bad tackler. One of the reasons why I didn't want the Packers to draft him. He gets pegged as a separator. I didn't see that as someone who he's going to snap off routes to create opportunities. I just don't think that's really his game. He's a smooth operator. You'll hear later in the show, Chancellor will compare him to Chris Olave. I think that's a very good comparison in a lot of ways. I was higher on Olave for a number of reasons, but that's, I think, a good comparison. He's best at what I call full speed breaks. So that little inside out crossover step on a post route he can create. And that's the play that he scored on against Arizona State. We talk a lot about that play to win that game. So my final report here, I like Golden as a secondary playmaker. He's not going to be the driver of your offense. He's not dynamic enough as a route runner and is slower on the field in his time speed. He's not dynamic after the catch on underneath routes, but can create a chunk play in space. He's the kind of Z receiver who can be a terrific complement, create opportunities when the intention is on the main receiver, and reminds me a bit of Jordan Addison. His ability to make difficult catches at his size is a plus, but because he's smaller already, it's not something he can hang his hat on in the NFL. And he never produced at a super high level despite playing at Houston to start his collegiate career. He is, to me, the definition of a second round receiver. Now, the conversation that I have with Chancellor is not all about all of the issues that I see. Okay. So don't freak out about that. I try to go into these conversations with an open mind. I try not to lead the witness. I'm going to let all of these people that I talk to for this essentially speak for the player, speak about the player. So I know that I've gotten some criticism for the way that I have talked about this pick. A lot of people are very excited about this pick. I get it. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this pick. It's just the value to me was not what I would have wanted it to be because I just don't love the player as much as the Packers. So we'll see who's right. And we'll talk to Chancellor Johnson about Matthew Golden next on Locked On Packers. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Did you watch that Celtics-Knicks game last night? I mean, it was crazy in there. And by the end, a morgue because the Knicks stole game 2 and are now up 2-0 on Boston. Oh, it's such a shame. I feel so bad for them. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Plus, with all-in pricing, there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Joining me now from Houston, formerly a Green Bay reporter, now in Houston, Chancellor Johnson. And Chancellor, the reason I wanted to talk to you is you did this great interview with Matthew Golden about his pre-draft, about the tape. That was what the really focus was. It was actually a beautiful little Trojan horse into talking to him because you got a chance to get a little bit of his personality because right, these guys are most comfortable talking ball. Like that's where they are. And you were able to get in some personality from him, some interesting questions there. When the Packers took him though, you know the history here from your time in Green Bay, no receiver since 2002. What was your reaction when you saw that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for the kind words. Listen, man, I was surprised and naturally just going based off historically what we know the Green Bay Packers to do, and that's not take a wide receiver in the first round. And so for me, covering the Houston Texans, being here in Houston, I had my eye on him slipping past that past the Packers after he kind of, slipped through kind of the teams there. And I thought maybe he might have a chance to stay home where he's from and play for the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
And then, when Roger Goodell got up there and made the announcement while he was there in Green Bay, which I think is really, really awesome for him and for the Packers, not Roger Goodell, Mark Murphy, of course, made the selection. I thought it was really awesome to see him there, and so I'm excited, right? Especially for a wide receiver, you can't obviously for any draft pick, you can't choose where you go to, and you don't get to choose who you play for. But man, he's getting a chance to play with a darn good QB, and I think he and Jordan Love will make for a really good tandem.
Given what we saw later in the draft in Houston, like probably a pretty good chance that they do take Matthew Golden, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, they ended up taking 2 wide receivers,
From Iowa State,
from Iowa State, and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. And so I think Matthew Golden was definitely on their board. He was brought in for a visit. They know him very well, even going back to his days when he was at Klein Kane, played at University of Houston before transferring to UT. And so they needed some wide receiver help. And not to get too far into the Texans, but really Nico Collins has really been their only option, especially after Stefon Diggs left to go play for the Patriots and Tank Dell was likely not to play this season. They needed somebody else to combo that up with Nico, and I thought Matthew Golden had a really good opportunity to play there, but Green Bay made the decision, and I think it's certainly a good one to team up with a really good wide receiver room overall in Green Bay.
Yeah, Jordan Love and CJ Stroud were already going to be compared as young players. I certainly am guilty of doing that. I don't feel any guilt about doing it, but I certainly have done it. And then now you have this receiver class versus what Houston did. I think that comparison point is going to remain. So let's back up now to let's go to the college football playoff. You're an Arizona State guy. Before you got a chance to sit down with Matthew Golden and watch the tape and go through it, you had to watch your team against Matthew Golden. And I think that's always a really interesting way to frame these conversations. Like, what is it like to go against that guy? Because when you have to go against Justin Jefferson or you have to go against Jamar Chase, you just get a different feeling for what it's like, right? To have that, to experience that the same way that NFC North fans for a long time got to experience going against Aaron Rodgers. You have a different appreciation for it. So as you're watching your Sun Devils trying to beat this Texas team, and he rips your heart out on 4th and 13, were you watching the game going, we just have no answer for this guy? Because going back and watching the tape, it certainly felt like that was the case.
And it certainly was. And so, watching that college football playoff game, it's interesting because obviously what I do as a journalist, I'm always unbiased in what I cover. But with the college football, I was able to be a fan, right? I was able just to cheer on Arizona State. So I didn't have to, I could put my fan goggles on and everything. And so for Arizona State, if you remember that game, for them to come back, looked like it was going to get dark early, right? For a little bit, you can even say ASU was kind of happy to be there, right? And they come back and they
Matthew Golden said, we thought this was going to be a walk. We thought we were going to blow them out.
And as Golden said in the interview, if you go back and watch, he said it, right? Like, that was going to be a blowout. And so, and I think that's fair with the talent differential coming into that game. But ASU, look, man, my Sun Devils, they fought hard. And they had a legitimate opportunity to win that game. And you look at it, even, everybody talks about the 4th and 13, but the guy had 7 catches, 449 yards. I mean, he was killing ASU. And so to get to that moment where I remember standing up in my parents' living room, like arms folded, like, by the TV, one stop. You see one stop and it's over. And here he goes and converts on this 4th down. Not just converts it, he scores a touchdown. Like, they could have picked up a 1st down and kept things going, but he was able to find a hole in the zone there and get over the top of the defense, something that he has done a lot over the course of the season, and was able to extend that game for UT, and ultimately, of course, the Longhorns ended up winning that game. But a special performance, and that's one thing just overall that stood out to me when I watched Matthew is his ability to show up in big games, right? Whether it was the Georgia game, the SEC championship game, the college football playoff, or even Michigan early in the season where he went to the big house and helped UT get really one of their marquee wins of the season. He shows up in big moments, and that's a skill in itself that we don't really talk about, right? Of how do you perform when the lights are the brightest? And as he said in the interview, he embraces those moments. And I can't do anything but respect that.
Well, and look, that is someone that the Packers needed. They needed that against Philadelphia. They needed that against Minnesota late in the season, against the Detroit late in the season. In those big games last year, they did not come up big. And it feels like this pick in some ways is a direct result of what we saw last year. They need someone. He carries himself with that confidence, but it is a quiet confidence, right? Like he's not that you're if you're going to make a caricature of a number one receiver, it's the brash, it's the AJ Brown, the big personality, the give me the damn ball, but he's not that. At the same time, you can see in the way he carries himself, he exudes that confidence. What was your impression of him that way?
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. It's a quiet confidence, but he's certainly sure of himself. And really, when you think about it, if you go back to him transferring from Houston and going to UT, really the number one wide receiver going into that year was supposed to be Isaiah Bond.
Right.
And it ended up being Matthew Golden. And this is him coming in, replacing A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. And UT's usually always keeps weapons on them, for their QB. And
God, those four guys can fly. My goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing about him is he plays with a chip on his shoulder. But as he likes to describe himself, he says, "I'm a dog," and you see it in multiple moments throughout the season. Like I said, especially like in the big moments to me when they count the most. And as you mentioned, that's something that the Packers struggle with, and we both know that, right? When those big games against some of those playoff teams, they just couldn't get over the hump, and that seemed to be the theme of the season, even when they lost in the playoffs. But I think Matthew Golden can come in and really help that room and give them. I'm not saying it's going to be his rookie season. Like that's tough to put on a guy like that. I'm not saying his rookie he's going to be and be the alpha one, but I certainly think he can grow and develop into being that go-to guy for Jordan.
Well, and this is interesting too because he's a Houston transfer. And I know you're in the Houston market, but I also know the Houston athletics is not as big as UT. It's not as big as the Rockets, not as big as the Texans. You would have expected a first round receiver to come to Texas, especially in state, with a lot of fanfare, but he wasn't that guy at Houston. And he's talked about the maturation that he had to do, the work that he had to put in. He was a different player at Houston, right? Like this was not someone that showed up at Texas and everyone went, hey, this is the next guy in this line of receivers.
No, I think that's an accurate description. I think for him, his freshman year, and we talked about that in the interview as well, he came in playing with Tank Dell, and so he had an opportunity to really learn with him. And man, they were beating up on some teams. That's when Clayton Tune was there. If you remember, that was the year Dana Holgorsen was the head coach. They had Clayton Tune and Tank Dell, and they came into the preseason as like a dark horse, like can they maybe make the playoffs, right?
Right, I remember.
And and they came in a preseason top 25 team, and they beat UTSA like that. The first game it was a really good game, all that good stuff. And then after that, he had a good sophomore year, but he had a foot injury that kept him out for the rest of the year. And so after he was really close with Dana Holgorsen, and after he left, and they hired Willie Fritz, who's a great coach, but he decided to explore other options. The quarterback situation wasn't the best, and I think he made the best decision for himself. And so, as I mentioned, like he
made him a lot of money.
Yeah, he made himself a lot of money, and Isaiah Bond was supposed to be that guy, and he just surely became Quinn Ewers' best friend, and he looked for him in critical moments and third downs, and that goes to him being able to be a separator, trusting your guy, and obviously that's so huge between a QB and a wide receiver. We know that in Green Bay for years, the relationships that Aaron Rodgers has had with some of his wide receivers. Same thing with Brett Favre, and so once again, he has to get on the field and he has to deal with Jordan Love, and that takes time. But he's certainly a guy that I think Jordan Love, and he should, right? He went as a first rounder for a reason, but he can certainly be that guy.
All right, more on our rookie orientation series on Matthew Golden next on Locked On Packers. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you can get multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. There's an attitude piece here that I did not notice the first time. And I'm usually someone who is very into the body language. I love to watch how a player carries themselves. One of the things that stood out to me, and this is like very random, but I think my audience will appreciate, when I was watching Grant Dubose come out, who's now in Miami, but was a Packers draft pick, he did the too small like 4 or 5 times his last year. And Matthew and Grant Dubose, not a big guy. Matthew Golden, also not a big guy, 5'11", 190 and change. Yeah. But he would make a big play and he would let the corner know. He was even doing the Packers receiver, the money celebration when he would make big catches. He has that confidence about him. Maybe I'm overreaching. You tell me. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say he certainly has a confidence about him, and I remember because I asked him about it, about hey, like are you a big trash talker? And he goes, not really. And it's just, I think it's just part of, there's some guys who certainly, they make a play, they're going to let you know. There's other guys, it's just kind of part of the game. I'll give you an example, like Nico Collins covering for the Texans. He's not really a trash talker, but at the same time, when he makes a big play, right, you're gonna turn up for yourself and for your guys, and a lot of times when the guy who doesn't usually talk the most stands up and starts pounding their chest.
Right. Yeah.
It can galvanize everybody else. But I don't think Golden is the guy. He's certainly not a diva. And he's certainly not a guy who's just going to be, just yapping all the time. But, once again, it goes back to that quiet confidence. If I'm doing the money sign, hey, he should, right? First round pick, pay me. So I have no problem with that at all. But yeah, he's certainly a fun guy, to really cover in general.
Well, I wanted to drill down on this one little moment, and you can tell me if you think I'm overreading this, but I think it speaks to competitive spirit. He's breaking down that 4th and 13 call with you, and he won't even tell you the play call. And his explanation was, and the quote is almost verbatim, because we're still going to run it. He's not at Texas anymore. He's going to be in the NFL by the time that anyone sees, that, or is on his way to the NFL when anyone watches that tape. But to stay loyal in that moment, to be a competitor enough to say, I'm not telling you about that. No way, because my guys are still going to run that next year. That flagged for me. I was like, okay, this guy, there's a loyalty there. There's a competitive spirit there where I'm not giving you any competitive advantage about me. Even after the fact, I just like, am I overreading that? Like it just, like that meant something to me.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're overreading it. And I'll even give you a little bit more. One thing about me, when I do these interviews, a lot of times I talk to these guys off the record. And I can say this because there was nothing that ultimately ended up being on the record. But even when I interviewed Tank, especially like these pre-draft stuff, and I interviewed Tank when he was coming out of Houston before he got drafted. A lot of times I like to ask him, sometimes, I'll tell him like, hey, look, I'll ask you, hey, where do you maybe, what maybe teams do you see yourself maybe going to? And look, I only use it if it plays out that way and developing that trust. A lot of times, whether it's Tank, Matthew Golden, or whoever, it's the trust of, I'll only use it in this situation.
Right.
And like I've been around, Golden a few times. We have I would like to say a solid relationship. And so I was asking him questions of like, hey man, like this is off the record, and I'm just we're just chatting. Even some of the stuff that wasn't recorded, we're just chatting. And he was and as cool as I thought we were, and I think we are, he just wouldn't give me anything. He was like, yeah, it's a cool team, and we talked about the Packers even. I was like, oh, like, know anything about Green Bay? And I was like, yeah, and he kind of made that to whether it was the Texans, whether it was the Packers, whoever. And I was like, man, look, brother, we just talking, man. He was like, no, I'm good. And I respected it, right? I'm not going to be pushy or anything.
Right.
And so that just kind of goes to tell you, who he is. He's about his business. And I have no choice but to respect that. But I will say we did talk about the Packers. And I told him about my experience there because I was like, hey, it might happen. Wink, wink. Yeah. And he was, and he was like, yeah, good football town, great QB, good roster. Left it at that. So I had no choice but to respect it. So, yeah, certainly that is a fair evaluation of Golden.
Yeah, he mentioned when he was, I think it was in one of the pre-draft like events in Green Bay, he mentioned the culture, and then he mentioned it again after the fact. And Steve Sarkisian has had to rebuild the culture at Texas. and you leave a program like Houston because you're in search of a different kind of culture, right? Like a new head coach comes in, you go, look, I want something different. From a culture fit perspective, I know you have experience with some of the guys that are there in terms of coaches and all that. So like, what is your perception of the culture fit with Golden and Green Bay?
Oh, I have no concerns about it at all because he's certainly a team player. And one thing that, we talked about, we talked about the routes. We talked about his route running. We talked about his separation, his ability to, make catches in traffic, body control, all that good stuff. And unprompted, he brought up, one thing that I really appreciated while I was at UT was, developing as a run blocker. Like that was important to him, and so like that once again, I didn't
He's got to keep developing at run blocking.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's not necessarily sexy to talk about in an interview. If I have you for X amount of time, I want to talk about how you routed these guys up. But
right.
You mentioned, like, hey, that's something that was important to me, and because he understands the value of that, and we both know in a system like that Matt LaFleur has, you have to be able to put people on their butt, or at least be able to contain them to allow no block, no rock, and so that's something that stood out to me in that interview, and something that he's certainly going to have to do up there in Wisconsin.
It's not just that too. I think the experience he had last year. You mentioned the Isaiah Bond piece of this. He did not go into the season as the guy who was going to be featured in the offense, but he just kept working and he just kept making plays. And eventually he became the guy that was featured. And you didn't hear about any issues there. He just kept being about his business, to use the phrase that you mentioned earlier. That's going to have to be what he does in Green Bay, right? Like Jaden Reed's already there. Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, like they have dudes already there. They're not superstar players, but they're good players and they're established in Green Bay. It just seems like if you're going to drop a guy in who can both potentially be your number one guy, but is also not going to make a fuss year one about not being the number one guy, like it's someone who's experienced exactly what he experienced last year.
Yeah. I think that for him, it also helps going to a space like Green Bay, where, obviously in my time covering there's also like your teammates are really kind of all you have up there. Cause most players don't really bring their family, the family might fly in, for game day, especially when it gets to the winter months, you're not going out in general for the most part. Right. And certainly not when it's, snowstorming and all that good stuff. So, it helps that he's coming into a place where there are talented wide receivers and you can sit back and learn. And as I mentioned, he's not coming in as like, it's not like he's coming in as Marvin Harrison Jr., where, he is going to be undoubtedly, we expect an immediate impact and X amount, whether him or neighbors or, guys selected in the top 10. Like he's a guy that I think, there needs to be some space for him to grow. And because he's not a, if you're fully formed wide receiver one coming out. But now, like I said, I think it helps though. You have different wide receivers in Green Bay with different skill sets, right? Whether it is a Jaden Reed or a Romeo Doubs or so on. So, I think he's a natural fit with anybody personality wise. And I'm excited to see him continue to develop, throughout this offseason heading into his rookie year.
I'm going to finish this here. Robert Mays over at The Athletic, when he said when he watched Matthew Golden, he saw a player who he thought, or at least who reminded him of Stefon Diggs, someone who you covered last year. And that is high praise. And Mays was a big fan of Matthew Golden's game. Do you see those similarities? And if so, where?
I wouldn't say Diggs. I think the route running, I can kind of see it. The player who I kind of see is a little more of like Chris Olave.
Okay.
And Olave, when healthy,
player that the Packers really liked in the draft too, by the way.
For sure, is a wide receiver one. Personality is he's certainly not a Stefon Diggs. And I say that not in a negative way, because covering Diggs, I think there's some things that were overblown, because Diggs was beloved in Houston as far as like the teammates. Like he was an actual leader and guys looked to him. Golden doesn't really give me that sense, because as I mentioned, he's more of a kind of a low-key guy that guys gravitate towards too, but he's not necessarily like, going to be the guy running you out of the tunnel necessarily, which is okay, right? At the end of the day, are you producing on the field, right? And so I see more of an Olave type guy, but Chris Olave, once again, you give him a good QB and you keep him on the field. He's a Pro Bowl caliber guy and certainly worthy of a wide receiver one honor.
All right. Well, we will have our eye on that. We will have our eye on all of the work that you're doing. We appreciate the time as always, man. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for the time.
All right. Thanks to Chancellor Johnson for joining me on our first rookie orientation series. Much more to come with those here on Locked On Packers. Plenty of fun players to talk about. Back tomorrow. Follow me on social media. Peter_Bukowski on Twitter. Peter Bukowski. You just got to search for me on Blue Sky, all those places. Follow the podcast on all the social medias. Follow us, or just pick one, maybe. Follow the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.